Everyone agrees on Martin Mertens. He's the deadbeat, the con man, the father who looked his son in the eyes after 16 years and said, "Good for you, kid," like Finn was a stranger who held a door open for him. He's selfish, he's manipulative, he's slippery, and the show gives you every reason to write him off. The fandom wrote him off. Most analysis of him starts and ends at, "Bad dad, good riddance." And I think that reading is missing something. Something the show hid in plain sight across multiple seasons and never drew a line under. Because Adventure Time is not a show that makes things simple. So why are we so comfortable making Martin simple? This video is a reread, not a defense. I want to be clear about that up front. Martin does genuinely terrible things, and we're going to talk about them honestly. But a reread, because when you go back through everything the show actually gives us about him, not the version Finn needed him to be, not the version the fandom settled on, what you find is a lot more ambiguous than the story everyone agreed to tell. And that ambiguity might be the most honest thing Adventure Time ever did. Let's go back to the beginning. Not the moment Finn tears open that prison and finds a man who doesn't recognize him. Go further back. Go to the islands. Go to Founders Island, to a barber shop, to a man cutting hair and living quietly and clearly, visibly trying to be someone different than he used to be. Because that's where Martin's story actually starts. And it's the part that gets skipped over constantly. The Martin we meet on Founders Island isn't the con man. He's not running a scheme. He's got a partner he loves, Minerva, and a baby son he is clearly, demonstrably devoted to. There's a visual in that episode that I keep coming back to. Martin sitting with his legs around baby Finn, this specific way of holding him, this protective posture. It's tender. It doesn't feel like a man performing fatherhood. It feels like someone who actually found something worth being present for. He'd walked away from his old life. It came back for him anyway. The people he'd conned came looking, and Martin ran, not to protect himself. He ran with Finn. He got to a raft. He was trying to get his son out. And then the Guardian found them. Here's the thing about the Guardian that the Martin conversation almost always skips. The Guardian is enormous. It is a machine built specifically to stop people from leaving Founders Island by any means necessary. And Martin, a human man with no magical ability, looked at that thing coming at them and made a choice. He put Finn on the raft. He sent the raft away from the Guardian. He turned around and fought it. He fought a giant robot with his body so his infant son could drift to safety. And then he lost. Based on the promo art from that episode, he woke up on a pirate ship, head wounds, visible trauma, no Finn, no life he'd built. I'm not saying the head trauma excuses everything that comes after. I'm saying we have to at least sit with what that moment actually was before we move on to judging the man who crawled out of it. Because the story the fandom tells, Martin abandoned Finn, is technically true in the most surface level way possible. But the story the show actually tells is Martin fought for Finn, lost consciousness, and woke up a different person in a different world with no way back. Those are not the same story. Now, let's talk about the Citadel, because this is where people stop giving Martin any benefit of the doubt. And honestly, fair. This is the hardest part of the reread. This is where he looks at his son standing right in front of him, who broke out a cosmic prison to find him, and feels essentially nothing. This is where he calls him Flynn, where he weaponizes Finn's need to get what he wants, and then leaves anyway, ascending into space on the back of a space moth while Finn screams below him. I'm not going to tell you that's not bad. It is bad. It's genuinely awful to watch. But here's the question I want to ask about that scene, and I want you to actually sit with it before you answer. How much of what Martin does in the Citadel is selfishness, and how much of it is a man who doesn't fully remember who Finn is? The show never answers that directly. It's deliberately vague about how much the head trauma took, but there are these flickers, little moments where something underneath the surface moves. When he sits with Finn in the Visitor, that leg position again, the same one from Founders Island. He doesn't explain why he sits that way. It just comes out of him, like muscle memory. He names his escape pod the Mini, after Minerva. In the middle of all his chaos and selfishness and running, he named his pod after the woman he lost. These aren't the details of a man who feels nothing. These are the details of a man who can't fully access what he feels. And there's a difference. But here's where the reread gets really interesting. Here's the part that I think changes the whole frame. Finn's relationship with Martin doesn't just shape Finn's grief, it shapes everything. The reason Finn spent seasons building himself around being a hero is at least partly because he spent his whole life unconsciously trying to earn a father's attention he was never going to get. The Tower, where Finn builds a psychic arm out of pure rage to go rip Martin's arm off. That episode is a masterclass in showing you how much of Finn's self-concept is wrapped up in a relationship that was never going to give him what he needed. And the moment Finn lets go of the rage, the arm disappears. Because the arm wasn't about Martin. It was about Finn trying to make his pain into something with a solution. And here's the uncomfortable part of that. If Martin had come back, if he'd shown up one day, functional and present and trying, what does that do to Finn? A Martin who came back and was still selfish would have destroyed him. A Martin who came back and was genuinely changed would have handed Finn an answer to a question that the show, that life, never actually gives you. The question of whether the people who left you were ever going to be capable of staying. The show refusing to give Finn that closure isn't a writing failure. It's the most realistic thing Adventure Time ever did. Because in real life, absent parents don't usually come back transformed. And if they do, it's rarely clean. And the people who grow up whole despite that absence, they grow up whole not because the parent came back, but because they found something else to build themselves around. Which is exactly what Finn did. Joshua, Jake, Billy, a chosen family that taught him everything Martin couldn't. There's something I want to say about that chosen family piece, because I think it reframes the Martin question completely. If Martin had stayed, he wouldn't have become the Finn we know. He probably grows up in a protected bubble, engineered by Minerva, safe from every moment of genuine moral difficulty. He becomes one of the humans on the tablets, comfortable, watched over, never tested. The Finn who grows up in Ooh, who gets dropped into a magical world with a shape-shifting dog for a brother and a dead hero's legacy to live up to. That Finn gets to become something. The loss made space for the growth. Martin's separation from Finn was not a choice, but the outcome of that separation, Finn washing up in Ooh, being found by Joshua and Margaret, being raised in a world that needed him, that outcome quietly gave Finn everything. And I'm not saying Martin deserves credit for that. He doesn't. But the question the video's title is asking isn't whether Martin was a good father. He wasn't. The question is whether Finn was better off for the path Martin's story put him on. And I think the answer is yes, uncomfortably, without any clean redemption arc for Martin. By the comet, Martin chooses transcendence. He merges with the catalyst comet and disappears into something beyond human. And Finn watches it happen and chooses the opposite. Chooses his mortal life, his people. The contrast is the point. The show set up Martin's ending and Finn's ending side by side, specifically so you could see what Finn had become by not becoming his father. But there's something quietly devastating in Martin's ending too, if you let yourself look at it. The man who once fought a giant robot for his son, who named his escape pod after the woman he loved, who used to sit in that specific way that came back to him even when nothing else did. That man ends his story by dissolving into cosmic nothing rather than having one honest conversation. The good Martin, the barber on Founder's Island, he didn't make it out of that fight with the Guardian. What survived wasn't nothing, but it wasn't enough. And the show never let him fully face what he lost and what he cost other people by not fighting harder to get back to it. Maybe that's the most honest thing about him too. Some people don't get their reckoning, and the people they left behind have to figure out how to be whole anyway. Finn figured it out. He figured it out because he had people around him who showed him that being present was something a person could actually choose. Every day, even when it costs something. Martin's story is a tragedy. Finn's story is the answer to it. And the fact that Adventure Time never gave Finn a tearful reconciliation or a final scene where Martin looks at his son and finally sees him makes their story feel painfully real. Leave a like if this one hit different. Subscribe if you're new, because this is the kind of deep dive you'll find here regularly. I'll catch you in the next one.